So Sarah is the CEO at Found, which is the leading weight care platform combining telemedicine and behavioral solutions. Found has helped nearly 200,000 patients and members, lose a lot of weight and also live happier, healthier lives. Prior to that, Sarah spent 4 years building a company called Bumble from the ground up, all the way to and through an IPO, valuing the company at $8 billion. We're going to learn a little bit about that experience today. And yeah, literally one of the best CEOs I've ever worked with. I'm inspired by her every day. I learn from her every day. And so it's my honor to have her here today with us.
Yeah.
$8 billion IPO. Like, how the heck did that happen? Tell us about that whole process.
A dating app, how does that turn into an $8 billion company? I mean, first and foremost, you pay attention to your customers. People want love. They want relationships. It's like an innate human need. And what Whitney realized early on was that she had been a co-founder at Tinder. All of the dating apps were a terrible experience for women. So even though it was a very crowded market, 50% of the potential member base was being ignored. No one had built a product for them. And so she was very crystal clear early on that Bumble's DNA would be about women more than dating, candidly, which is why we could build things like Bumble BFF and Bumble Biz. But yes, to your point, we IPO'd the business during the pandemic. We similarly had a crisis of confidence in the early pandemic, wondering what was going to happen to dating. But the desire for human connection never goes away. And when you don't have places like bars to connect, it actually took more people to dating apps. So I think that was an accelerant for us in many ways as well. But just prior to the IPO process, we were acquired by Blackstone. So a really interesting part of Bumble's journey that maybe people don't know is that it never raised venture capital at all until $3 billion acquisition by Blackstone in 2019. Had a very non-traditional route to getting started. It was majority owned by a company called Magic Lab, which also operates a dating app called Badoo, at the time one called Chappie, one called Lumen. And we knew that in order for Bumble to have a shot at the public markets, we needed to clean up some of that ownership structure and elevate the Bumble brand, which was really resonant in the US, over some of the other legacy apps in that portfolio. So think of Magic Lab as a mini Match Group that then turned into Bumble Inc. after the Blackstone acquisition. We actually initially expected that we would run the company with the support of Blackstone. We restructured the subsidiary and parent model into one operating entity and had no plans to go public initially. The private equity buyout was sort of our end of the road optionality. And then the markets did really pick up, and the pandemic was a massive accelerant for Bumble. And I think from the time that we had the bake off till we filed our first S1 was only 4 or 5 months. And by the way, this will terrify you as a CFO. We weren't even GAAP compliant at that point because our parent company had been based in the UK. We were operating under IFRS. So we had a lot of work to do. And as Chester alluded to, it was a challenging time for me personally. The pandemic happened in March of 2020. We had just closed the Blackstone acquisition. And then in May of 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. Out of the blue, no family history. I was under 40. And it was a really challenging time for me personally to figure out what I wanted to do in that moment. I had been chief operating officer of the company up until that time. I joined when it was 30 people. We were now, I just sold the company for $3 billion to a leading private equity fund. And suddenly you're questioning your own mortality in a really substantial way. And one thing that was important to me is I knew I didn't want to become a full-time patient. I knew I wanted to work in some capacity. But I also felt like I had really limited emotional bandwidth. Like normally I love growth and professional development and building and investing in teams. And I had none of the bandwidth for that. But I knew I could run a team of bankers and lawyers and an S1 process. And so I talked to my boss, Whitney, and moved into a chief strategy officer role. I went from having coverage of effectively Bumble's P&L to running a team of 5 of basically internal strategy consultants. My first project was the Blackstone 100-day value creation plan. And then the second one was the IPO readiness process. And I could work on things like drafts of the S1 from the chemo chair. And, to cut to the chase, I'm healthy now. I'm 2 years cancer-free. My hair is growing back. And we may get to the story over time, but certainly that was transformative for me. And when I made the decision to leave Bumble shortly after the IPO, it was because I wanted to go build again. It's because the cancer journey really taught me that the time we have is so precious. I wanted to take a big swing. I wanted to bet on myself as a CEO. And once I got over the initial fear of it, I actually knew I wanted to build in healthcare because the only thing that rose to the same level of significance as relationships, to your point about the value of dating apps, is health in terms of its ability to improve the human condition. And so I was really excited to get connected with Atomic and start building within their portfolio.
It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, congrats on, win number one, which is the IPO, but the bigger win in getting healthy. And yeah, it's always inspiring for me to hear that.